Welcome to the Load Out Music Podcast, featuring intimate conversations with emerging and established musicians, recorded at the Gaslight Studios in St. Louis. And now your host, Aaron Perlut. Welcome back to the Load Out Music Podcast, and today I am joined by arguably one of the busiest guys in Nashville, if not all of music, Sadler Vaden. Sadler, thank you so much for making time. I know you and I had started talking about this maybe 6 months ago, and I'm glad we could finally make it work out.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here, Aaron. Thanks for having me on.
So yeah, before we get into everything you've had going on since, throughout this year, it would be remiss of me if we didn't talk a little bit about two things. One, probably some frustrations in being locked down, but also, obviously we're seeing some fundamental changes in our country going on. As an artist, as someone who tries to write and speak to kind of the social fabric of what's around you at the time, what has this period of time been like for you?
Well, I did my first social media post about kind of the current, protests and the platform of those protests. And, it's really, I work for, obviously, Jason Isbell. I'm in his band, and him as a writer, we've been kind of addressing those things for a while, and we all in the band, stand in solidarity with him on those issues, and everyone out there protesting these issues. But it's tough to watch still with sort of the video of George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery. And what's sad is that we know all these people's names. Like, it's become like, we can, I'm glad we remember their names. I just mean there's been so many.
Yeah.
It's like the school shootings and stuff. Like, you just go down the list and you can almost name 60-70% of these people. And it's tough to see, but I'm sort of glad that it seems like there is some action happening currently, right now. So I think this time around, they're being taken more seriously, the protests.
Yeah, it seems like we've reached a tipping point where frustrations that have been boiling in the Black community for decades upon decades, there finally may be some action taken to address those concerns. And change is scary for a lot of people, but change typically evolves into something that's productive and progressive.
Yeah, I just don't know. Yes, and it's hard to fathom that we're still dealing with this, and everyone should be treated equal. Everyone should have a fair shot, and in the music world, I would say the majority of folks that play music, I'll speak for myself. Like, I've never, growing up in the South, obviously, like, we do see color. Like, it's hard to admit that, but that is a thing that's real. But I've never once been like, oh, I'm not playing with that person because they're Black or whatever. It's in the music world, we don't really think about that. You know what I mean? Like, we just kind of play music together. All we see is really like heart and soul. We don't really look at that. Not to say that there isn't systemic racism in the music industry and all that, but just on the floor as musicians, maybe the rest of the world can take a tip from us about that, But there's so many things that I've been unaware of, that I'm now aware of, and I'm really thankful for it, because hopefully I can make a change.
Yeah, I think you do bring a good point up, and I was actually talking about this on our last episode with Fred LeBlanc of Cowboy Mouth, how the music industry, and I think you find this to a degree also in sports, when you've kind of collaborated and gone through these things together, there sometimes tends to be less racial barriers than you see. And like, if you go see music in New Orleans, Fred and I were talking, you know, you could see a extremely integrated crowd that you might not see somewhere else, but you also might see a band that's extremely integrated. And I think even in Nashville, I think a band like the War and Treaty that has, a really interesting collection of sounds and music, and just the composition of that band is very diverse.
Yes. Yeah, and I think you see it in I think you see it in a lot of music towns, because like I just said, as musicians, like we don't really, most of us, or at least the people I know, that's not how we vet or anything like that.
Yeah.
We're just playing music, and for the love of it, and we just see heart and soul,
Yeah.
so that's so, but with the reason I brought that up is, like, even though that's how I operate, there was still so many things that I just wasn't aware of, and guilty here, but it's like, now I have the information, and we can all try to make changes.
Yeah, yeah, and of course, this all comes on top of the wave of this pandemic, where everybody's been locked out. Where, especially, I think people in your field, in your chosen career,
Yeah.
that
Hmm.
particularly as the financial model for music has changed, and you make your money solely off touring, and records really don't make you money anymore as they once did maybe 20 years ago. This has to be, frustrating, crazy, but I'm sure it's also been a great time for you just to be creative as well.
It's been a highly creative time for me, given that my solo album just came out in March, and then we had the new 400 unit album that recently came out almost a month ago. But honestly, married. Um, it's been nice to be home. It's been nice to connect with my wife and see her every day. So there are some positives that have come out of this. Not that I don't love touring and love playing music, and I look forward to being able to do that again. I'm finding ways to keep creative, though. I'm really stepping out on the guitar outside my own box a lot during this time. Really just pushing my brain in different ways, which has been a lot of fun. And not that I couldn't do that previously on the road, but I think there's a lot of distractions, and maybe you just, you're playing every night, and you don't have that, like, personal time and reflection and just patience to sit there and learn something new.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I was talking with a couple episodes ago with John Oates from Hall and Oates, and typically the way he splits up his year is in May, he and Daryl, they'll tour through September,
Yeah.
and those shows have gotten bigger and bigger. And then he might do some of his solo roots oriented music in the late fall and early winter, and then take some, couple months off here and there. He said he's never been home. He actually lives there in Nashville too. He's never been home this many consecutive days. It's been a real adjustment period for him.
Yeah, I don't think I've been home this much since I was 18, maybe something like that, consecutively. So it's tough, because I'm like, oh my God, I have a summer.
Yeah,
Like, I can do it. But it's
like
like,
a teacher.
oh, but I can't go just do whatever I want. Like,
Yeah,
without, taking precautions, and, it costs money. And so you got to be careful there, because I don't know what the future holds right now, for that. So, everybody, I think, in the music community is tightened up a little bit, like, well, we'll see what happens. I mean, I'm concerned with the independent venues that are at risk. I'm concerned with the rising independent artists who are just getting things going. And I'm concerned about folks that work behind the scenes as booking agents and things that really all their income is off of touring, and in some ways, at least us as musicians, singer songwriters, we can do a live stream, we can throw up a tip jar, there are ways we can kind of keep engaging. But I mean, if you don't work for a major company that books, if you don't work for a William Morris or something like that, then you might be falling on a little bit of a harder time. So
Yeah, it's a challenging time for a lot of people, and yeah, it's been a very difficult time on so many different levels too. Uh, let's talk a little bit about your career. You mentioned that this might be the first time since you were 18. I mean, that's really when you became a professional musician in your late teens. Talk a little bit just about your upbringing. I know you're from near Charleston, and just how you got into music and your kind of experiences and what drove you.
well, and I'll say professional musician in my mind just means somebody's paying you to play music.
Yeah.
But yeah, 18 is when I started to get paid to play music. I've always loved music. And my parents loved music. They weren't musicians, but they were just fans. Like, they were the people that buy concert tickets, and go see concerts. And my dad just really loved listening to music, and he collected a lot of vinyl growing up. He was born in 1952, so when he was buying vinyl, it was Zeppelin 1, stuff like that. Like, that's when he started buying vinyl. So I have all those records that were bought at that time, right to my right now. They're sitting over there. So I remember growing up listening to a lot of cassette tapes, a lot of vinyl, a lot of rock and roll music. So, I'm just a product of them, and I just love music. So when I was 10 years old is when I started playing guitar. And it was, I mean, thinking about it now, like, trying to remember, it's like how you're riding, like when you're learning to ride a bike, it's so hard. And like guitar is like the same way. It's like so hard to do and push your little fingers down, but I just loved it because it was making sounds, and every day I felt like I would get somewhere new with it, so that really is why I started. We went to a concert called Farm Aid in
Mm-hmm.
Columbia, South Carolina. It was held there that year because Hootie and the Blowfish was asked to play the festival, and they had played it, I think, the year before, but they were so big at the time that they told Willie Nelson, which who tells Willie what to do, but they told him, they said, we'll play if you have it in Columbia, South Carolina, home of the Gamecocks.
Yeah.
So we were living in North Myrtle Beach, and my dad saw the lineup. It's like, we got to go, take the kids. So, at the time I was really into like basketball and skateboarding, and I liked music, but like seeing that concert was it changed my life. That's why I do what I do.
That was big of Darius and the boys to make that sacrifice for Willie and Neil and and John
You know
Mellencamp.
what? Hootie and the Blowfish are good people. So I'm just going to state that right now. I don't know every single one of them, but I know a few of them, and they are good folks. They've always pretty much done the right thing, and they help people out, and they're you listen to Cracked Review. I listened to it the other day. It's so good.
It's a great record. I mean, the records of that era, like the Counting Crows' first album came out right around then too, and that was kind of the later, when Nirvana was kind of getting to some of its later records. There's some great records from that period, but that album is huge.
It sounds so good too. Like, just now that we've evolved and we've heard so many different types of music and the way things have recorded, like, so our ears are getting trained to hear these things that are made literally on computers, and that's it. There's not an analog thing going on. or there's not a piece of analog gear preamp going on in the chain. And not to say that that's bad, but you know, you put a record made from that time on, and you're like, wow, that sounds really good. And you know, I think there was like a year. Jason and I have spoke about this before. I think it was 71, maybe. 71 was like a really magical year for like rock music and records that came out. And I feel like 1996 or something like that is like kind of the same thing, or like 94 or 96, you know, but those were really magical times for records.
Yeah, I can actually think back to the even, you know, being born. I was born in 1971. Some of the records, I mean, the Stones were producing records. Zeppelin was. Both the Faces and Rod Stewart were actually, back when Rod Stewart made like rock music. We're putting out music within.
And I believe Who's Next came out, I think,
Yeah.
in 1971. I'm not going to Google it, but you know, just it's either like it's between 70 and 73. Like there's one year that really stands out. I think it's 71. But
Who's next? Which, if you listen to song from end to end, every song on that record is amazing.
it is unbelievable.
Yeah. Yeah, it's remarkable. So this is like, you go to this concert with your dad, you see Farm Aid, and you're just like, I'm in. I'm hooked.
Yeah, I realized at that point how much I loved like live, you know, that experience.
Yeah.
And seeing Neil Young and the Crazy Horse, who just, I mean, it blew my mind. There's no better way to put it. Just blew my mind. And John Mellencamp did too. I mean, and they wrecked the drum set at the end of the show. And like, I mean, it was something to see at 10 years old. Yeah, so we got home and my dad pulled his acoustic guitar out of the closet, which I still have. I'll grab it and show you. He pulled this guitar out of the closet. It's a Yamaha FG 180.
See it.
And yeah, and really great sounding guitar, actually. I didn't even know he had the guitar. I'm like, where'd this guitar come from? It was like,
Yeah.
Here's a guitar out of the closet. And so he was all inspired, and like he was picking around the guitar, and I heard him, and I went in there, and you know, that kind of, that started everything.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you're 18 to start playing, is this in the kind of Myrtle Beach and Charleston area? You're playing in local bands there?
This is in Charleston, yes. We moved from North Myrtle Beach to Charleston when I was around 12 years old. So I spent 13 years in that area.
Yeah.
From 12 to 25 years old.
And then ultimately, a lot of people might not know this, but you end up playing in Driving and Crying, right?
I do. And I saw Driving and Crying open up for The Who, I think either the same year as Farm Aid or the year after that. But we went to Raleigh, North Carolina, and saw The Who play. And Driving and Crying was the opening band. And I fell in love with them, my sister and I. And we had heard a song or two from rock radio in North Myrtle Beach. Would play, I think probably they would play like Honeysuckle Blue or something like that. But yeah, seeing them, and then, you know, subsequently we went to see them at the House of Blues in Myrtle Beach after the Who concert when they came through on their own. And I'm a big fan. And I met Kevin Kinney on one of those music cruises. He saw me play. I went up to him, introduced myself, and he said, "Hey, I like the way you play. Like, what are you doing tomorrow night? We're playing our last show on the cruise and the whatever they were playing, lounge in the cruise ship." And I went in there, and he saw me, and he called me up, and I sat in with them, played Straight to Hell, and fast forward to probably maybe a year later, I got my band to open up for him in Chattanooga, and Kevin saw me in the crowd because I was rocking out, and he was like, you know, I'm like, I don't know what he's trying to tell me. Anyway, I go to the side of the stage and he sees me and he's like, you know, they hand me a guitar, plug me into an amp, and sat in with him. And that really started the friendship. And I'll say this about Kevin Kinney. That night, sorry to be long-winded, but that night, it was in Chattanooga, Tennessee. After they got done playing, he said, well, what are you guys doing after this? And I said, we're about to drive back home. He's like, oh, cool. Oh, tonight? We were like, yeah, we're just going to drive back to Charleston from Chattanooga. And he was like, no. He's like, no, you're not. We're like, well, we don't have any money to stay at a hotel. And he's like, I'll pay for a hotel. He's like, promise me you won't drive back. I'll pay for your hotel. And he paid for our hotel room that night. It was just 3 of us in the band. So that, there you go. Who does that?
Not a lot of people, man. Not a lot. So at what point did you become a member of Driving and Crying, and how long did that last?
So this was 2011. I think about summer 2011. I had a band called Leslie for about 6 or 7 years, and we did everything we could to get stuff going, and we did get some stuff happening, but it wasn't to the point where I really wanted it to be. And I was 25 at that point. I was having my quarter life crisis, I guess, and I was just worried that if I kept doing this, it wasn't going to get to that place, and I needed to do something else. The only way I was making money besides doing odd jobs here and there was playing guitar for people. That's how I made money. So I realized in that moment, what do people pay me to do? They pay me to play guitar for them. They don't pay me to write songs. I don't make money off writing my own music. So I said, that's what I'm going to do. And I think I need to go to Nashville. Right at that point, I broke my band up, or I just left the band. That was my band. And then right at that point, Tim, the bass player from Driving and Crying, was currently looking at houses. He was moving from Atlanta to Charleston, found out that I had left my band. They had just parted ways with their guitar player. He said, hey, well, maybe you can play for us. So one day he calls me, he goes, I'm going to Asheville to play a gig, but my car's in the shop. Can you give me a ride? And I'm like, sure, sounds fun. Like, one of my favorite bands, I'll give you a ride. Like, and he goes, well, bring your guitar and amp and stuff so you can sit in with us. Like, okay. So the show starts in Asheville. I think they get through about 2 songs, and Kevin calls me up on the mic to get up there and play, and I end up playing like the entire set with them. After the show, Kevin goes, there's a theme here. I go, well, I'm just going to go back and hang out with Candace, my girlfriend. I don't know. He goes, well, we got like 5 more shows. We're going up to New York. Would love to have you. If you want to come, hop in. He's like, I'll give you $100 a show. And I said, let me call my girlfriend and make sure it's cool. Also, I'm going to need to leave my car here, and I'm going to need to go to Walmart and get some socks and underwear because I don't have any clothes. So I hopped in, man, and then it just kept going from there. And I think probably about a month in is when they were like, hey, you want to be in the band? My pay went up, and I was in the band. And we did that for about 2 years.
That's great. It must be an amazing feeling to have this band that you admire and you've seen open for the Who, and then all of a sudden you're with those guys. You're part of that band.
It really was. I forget about it sometimes, and then every once in a while I'll kind of look at it and just, that's just, yeah, it's really special. And to be kind of aligned with the Who, like I have been kind of my whole life. Like, I don't know the Who guys, but they've always been a thread in my life. They're my favorite band of all time. Definitely in rock music. Yeah, it was really cool. And now I have lifelong friends. from doing it, which is important.
Yeah, yeah. So you're in Driving and Crying. You've kind of made that transition to Nashville. At what point do you link up with Jason and the 400 unit? How does that happen?
So that really happened. It was very organic, which is always the best way. I knew Jason a little bit. I knew Jason and the guys in the band a little bit. They actually, a little bit after I moved to Nashville, we did a gig in Muscle Shoals and Driving and Crying, and Jason and the band came to the gig, and we were all hanging out together and all that. And so my old band would open for Jason when he came around the Charleston area. So I had a little bit of history with him. And when I moved to Nashville, was doing Driving and Crying. And then at that point, I think I just moved to Nashville. Then Jason kind of moved there shortly after that, on his own right. And then he ended up going to rehab and all those things. And when he got out, he immediately got married, and then he made this record called Southeastern. And he had parted ways with the guitarist in his band, who is now in St. Paul and the Broken Bones. And, great guy, great player. It just was time. The time was up on their, tenure or whatever. So I'm not exactly sure what happened, but I became friends with Derry DeVorha, who's the keyboard player in the 400 unit. And then I met the manager, Tracy Thomas. And, one day, Tracy called me and said, "Hey, I heard you want to be in our band." And I was like, "Well, which one are you talking about?" And she goes, "400 unit." And I was like, I don't know. I was like, all right, well, let's take a look at this here. I mean, I think I was eager, I was interested, but I was kind of like, I was really happy doing Driving and Crying, and then I had a call with Jason, and, basically the story I got is that he was trying to think of guitar players that could be in his band, because a lot of the songs were acoustic driven on Southeastern with some electric lead parts. And he's like, I can't do both, obviously, and I got to play acoustic on a lot of this stuff, so I'm going to need another player. So the story I got was that his wife Amanda said, "Why don't you give Sadler a call, because he seems nice and cool and he's a good player." And so that was really it. I think there was a pretty short list. I think I was at the top of the list, and it was kind of like, if it's your gig if you want it. I went over to their house, and we kind of played guitars. He played me a few new songs and showed me kind of some things to do on those songs. And I guess he was testing me to see if I could pick it up fast or not.
Yeah.
And then about a week later, I got a call. He said, "Hey, we're playing Huntsville, Alabama. Can you come down and play the show?" And I was like, "I guess." He's like, I just assume let's go ahead and play a show. So we didn't rehearse, practice, anything. I just showed up, rode down the van with them, and did my best to play and stay out of the way. This time I was still in Driving and Crying. But it was clear to me that Jason was on the rise, and Driving and Crying was doing well, but they kind of had their time in terms of their arc.
Yeah.
And I talked with Kevin about it, and he was pretty supportive of me doing the move. In fact, his words were, "Man, I think if you have a chance to work with a songwriter like that, you should take it."
Yeah, and for people who don't remember, that Southeastern album, which sounds like this was on the tail end of that, I mean, that was kind of Jason's coming of age, where people were like, this is someone that everyone needs to be paying attention to.
Yeah, so I joined the band before it came out.
Okay.
So it was prepping up. You know, we were ramping up for the release, and he needed somebody to be in the band, and I joined. And about 2 weeks later, the record came out, and we were gone.
Yeah, kind of. The rest is history to a degree. We're going to take a quick pause to thank our sponsor, Wellbeing Brewing. You know, for anyone who's listened to this show or knows me personally, you know that in November of 2018, I quit drinking and I discovered Wellbeing Brewing's products. I'm a huge fan of the IPA and the Hellraiser Amber, and these things actually taste like real beer. In fact, they taste more like real beer than Anheuser-Busch products. Ha! Yes, I did say that. Wellbeing Brewing. So they've got a great treat for listeners of the Load Out Music podcast. All you've got to do is go to wellbeingbrewing.com, buy whatever you want to buy there, and at checkout, use the code LOADOUT. That is LOADOUT, and you can get 10% off your order. So a huge thanks to Wellbeing Brewing, and you know, I encourage you to try their products because I promise you, you will not be disappointed. Now back to our guest. Talk about anybody out there. I mean, you self-produced it. You know, there was a lot of promotion leading up to it, and you know, once it came out, it got tremendously reviewed with comparisons to Tom Petty and Oasis, which I know are, you know, two of your heroes. So I'd talk about just how much this means to you and what went into this record.
Oh man. Well, you know, I'll kind of go backwards. I'll kind of go from release to conceiving. It is equal parts so proud, equal parts super bummed, because, and there's nothing I can do about this, but it came out like 3 days after, or 2 days rather, after the tornadoes happened in Nashville, which is something that affected us locally. And then it came out a week before everybody's lives got turned upside down with COVID-19. So, you know, it's tough because it came out in this really, really unique pocket of time. But all the reviews, you know, I was really happy to read the critical reviews and everything. I was even more happy to see how many people bought the album and posted about it, how much they liked it and listened to it. You know, I'm constantly, you know, when I put out music, I don't battle, but people can't help but compare me to, you know, Jason, who I'm in, you know, I'm in his band. I work for him, you know. So sometimes that's hard because it's like, well, you know, I don't do the same thing, you know, he does. And I'm unique in my own right. And in fact, Jason, I think, genuinely likes the music that I make and all that. So there's a lot of things to unpack sometimes when I put music out, but I really, really am proud of the record. And I worked really hard on each song, you know, each song getting my full attention on the writing and the arranging and performing of it, you know. I love the fact that people do hear those influences and talk about those influences, because it's true. I can't hide from that, you know. But I view it as I like to make, like, I hear something that I like, that I'm inspired by, and sometimes I just want to make my own version of that, you know.
What I found, one thing I found interesting, one, you know, it's fascinating that you mentioned the comparative with Jason, because this is not a 400 unit record. This is a hard driving rock record for anyone that hasn't listened to it. I mean, and it's got songs that are kind of almost like rock anthem songs.
Yeah.
And I found it interesting that the review in Rolling Stone was by Rolling Stone Country. because
Yeah.
it's a rock and roll record. I mean, there's just no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It is a pure hard driving rock and roll album.
I will agree with you there, Aaron. I mean, that's what I tried to do. And that's the kind of, to me, I don't like to say the word brand, but, that's sort of the area that I choose to live in is rock and roll. I don't really strive to make a rock album or Americana. It's like, I just really purely want to make a rock and roll album, like the albums that I love, that have those shades of folk in them, that, they have, you can hear, those influences of blues in there. And then you hear those influences of the Beatles and sort of the way pop was, used in the rock and roll format. So, but it's odd because it seems like that genre as a term just doesn't get used anymore at all. Rock and roll has kind of become this term of like, it's about your attitude, or it's about how you look, or, you know what I mean? Like, like it's not really like a musical genre term anymore. I mean, I use it, but I mean, honestly, wherever they want to put it, if they want to call it country or whatever they want to call it, it's not up to me. I know in my heart what it is and what I tried to make. But it is fascinating. Like, and I also thankfully I get played on Outlaw Country on Sirius XM.
Yep. Yeah.
And, if you listen to that station, I mean, it's kind of like a rock and roll station.
It's, I heard, a lot of people don't know that is basically Steve Van Zant's station. And I heard him talking about what his goal was when he founded it. And he said, basically, I wanted a station where you could hear all three Hanks.
Yeah, that's cool. And I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I didn't know he started it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, and that's really where the term outlaw country was birthed, even though I think a lot of people thought of people like, Hank Williams, and even like today, it's fascinating because, to your point about this kind of branding of music, I mean, particularly like if you think about the music that you play with Jason, outside of outlaw country, I mean, you're not going to find that on mainstream country radio today because all they play is pop music, and all these lines have blurred, and there's so much good music that's being made today that doesn't really even fit into a genre. I mean, I think of what you guys do in the 400 unit as something that, if you go back and listen to the band, you can hear shades of country and you can hear shades of rhythm and blues in there. And then fast forward into like the 80s, and Uncle Tupelo, before they split up and became Sunvolt and Wilco, were making music that's more aligned with what I think you hear today in some of the kind of, we'll call it alt country bands, like what you do with the 400 unit. But you're right, like whether it's rock and roll or country, there's just these blurring of the lines, and there's a lot of places today where there's not even a home for it, that it's hard to find it, and there's some great stuff being made.
Yeah, and I consider the 400 unit, Jason, the 400 unit, to be a rock and roll band. That's what I always call us, because anyone that's seen us live, I mean, yes, Jason writes with, characteristics of like country, like traditional country. He's a really great songwriter. But I mean, Neil Young had shades of country, and Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers did too. And that's just the thing, is like rock and roll has all those things in it. That's why it's called what it's called. So I'm still a fighter for that term as a genre, and I think it should be allowed back into the fold. I mean, I just don't, you know what I mean? And the hard thing is like, where do you put it? And I'm like, well, you put it on the AAA stations. I mean, and that's kind of, you put it, that's where it goes.
Yeah.
But I do wish that rock radio would expand a little bit and sort of bring in bands like us and things like I make, that aren't so like considered active rock, so I think it would kind of diversify that format a little bit.
I love that term, active rock. I've seen it so many times. I'm like, what the hell does that mean?
Modern rock, active rock.
Yeah. Does that mean
like,
you sweat to it if it's active rock?
And I think Greta Van Fleet gets played on those stations, but then it's right up next to like the heavier bands, Breaking Benjamin or whatever else is still going on out there. And that's, I have nothing against that music. It's not personally what I listen to, but it would be nice if they kind of opened up the gates a little bit there.
So getting back to this record, Anybody Out There, which was released in March, I would imagine, it's probably been very frustrating that you haven't been able to tour in support of it, but still, you've got to be, especially with all the critical acclaim it's gotten, you've got to be so proud of this thing that you just kind of poured your heart and soul and all your energy into how well received it has been.
Yeah, I'm very proud of it. It's done better than anything I've ever put out in any form, being a band or solo. It's done better than anything. So that's something to definitely be proud of. And to me, it's like, it's all just sort of, I guess you could say, equity or something. I don't think about it as I'm putting out a record, I'm going out on my own, I'm leaving the 400 and everything. It's like, no, I don't have to do that, but I can still make music that I believe in and put it out there into the world and have it exist. I kind of look at it this way, where I look at it as like, it's sort of kind of my own version of what like Joe Walsh was. Although Joe Walsh was a major recording artist before he joined the Eagles, I see it as like 400 Unit is like, that's my Eagles, and when I'm in that band, I'm on that team, and everything comes first, but I can go over here and express myself and do my own thing and do my Joe Walsh, my version of that over here. So that's kind of how I look at what I do.
Yeah. And, we started this interview talking about how busy you've been. I know one of the other things you've been doing is working with someone that I think you and I are in the Mutual Admiration Society for, and that is working with young artists like with Morgan Wade, we've actually had on the podcast before.
Yeah.
And in fact, you and I first got connected when we were talking about her for an article that I wrote about her, I think maybe a year ago.
Yeah.
I remember you telling me how impressed you were with, there was a sense of authenticity in her voice when she played that really spoke to you, that you were like, that drew you to her, to wanting to work with her. And talk a little bit about that, about when, because I think were you at the show, or was it some of your bandmates were at the show and actually heard her playing and then sent you some sound from it? How did that work?
So our front of house engineer, our sound guy, Kane Hogshead, we were playing Floyd Fest that evening in Floyd, Virginia,
where she's from.
And where she's from, and she was performing on the local yokel tent. And we, as a band, though, we had just come from Newport Folk Fest, and we got in, and our tour manager had he had the idea for us to be parked at the hotel all day, because Floyd Fest didn't have really, for the amount of people we roll with, they didn't have quite like the the best, I guess, like dressing room areas and all that kind of stuff. And you're just in the middle of the woods. He was like, you guys stay at the Hampton Inn all day, which is like right off the interstate. Hang by the pool, just chill, shower, whatever. So we did that. And about midday, I got a text from Kane, our sound guy. Was like, dude, I just heard this girl on the stage, man. Like, her band's okay, but she is really, really good. And I was like, he said, you should check this girl out. You should produce this girl. And I was like, okay, well, yeah, I mean, how do I hear her? And he found it. He found a YouTube link and sent it to me. And I was like, damn, she is really good. And then I think he went up to her and said, I work for Jason Isbell, and yeah, I think he was like, you need to meet my friend Sadler's guitar player, and y'all should meet and all this stuff. And Morgan says now that her friend that was with her at the time was like, you're never going to hear from those people, kind of thing. And which is pretty funny. So she friended Kane, I think, on Instagram or something. And then anyway, we got hooked up via social media, and I just told her that I liked her voice, and I don't know if she's making a record or consider making a record, please, hit me up. I'm interested in working with you and all that. So one thing led to another, and we got on like a FaceTime call one day, and she played me some songs that she had, and some that weren't finished that I helped her finish up, and now, like, now we've made about a whole record, and we're getting close to prepping plans for another single to come out this year.
Yeah, I know that she is. She has spoken so highly of you as someone who has been a mentor to her, who has really helped guide her and help her grow. And something that she could not have done on her own without you. And I've heard, you guys and you released that first single you were working on, which is just terrific. So
yeah, and the stuff that's coming is a little different from that. And she's she's really young, but she's very bright to be so young. And she's just, everything that she does is from her heart. It's heartfelt.
yeah.
And so I try to listen to what she wants and what she's hearing, and I try to just serve her the best way I can.
Yeah, and for those listening that have not ever checked out Morgan Wade, you can find her on all the music services.
She's not the BMX biker.
Not the BMX biker, and then she has a previous album with the Step Brothers, I believe. Yeah, she's pretty terrific, and I think there's not a lot of women out there that are making the kind of, I would say, country infused rock that she's making, and she does have a very unique voice and style, and she's really impressive, and she's also a really wonderful person, so I can only hope great things for her. We got to jump into reunions because this was just released in the last couple weeks, and much like when Southeastern came out, the record has been hailed as just a masterpiece. And again, so this must be something that you look at because you were so involved in the creation and the production of it, and with just when people look at the art you've created and love it as much as people have loved this record, like your solo record, you must feel a remarkable sense of pride.
Yeah, I mean, I do. I'm kind of one of those musicians, artists, though, that I'm just kind of like, it's hard for me to see what other people see and hear with stuff that I'm involved, that I'm so closely involved with. But I do read reviews and things like that, I try not to believe them. You know, because I'm just one of those people, like, I'm not one of those it's never good enough people, but I'm always like, you know, we gotta get better, we gotta keep pushing, you know, the next time around. But I do feel like it's a really good record. It has things that are different from the other records I've been involved in with the band, and then it has some things that are kind of the same, you know. But I thought it was good. I thought it was a growth all the way around. I think we pushed Dave as a producer to step outside of what he's done with us in the past. He from my perspective, he gave us, each individual member, a little more time to work on something, because, you know, the way we make records with Jason is we don't hear anything, and then each day we all go sit on the couch and he plays us a song on the acoustic guitar, and then we all kind of talk about it and we man our stations, and, you know, usually 20 minutes later or something, we've kind of got a take.
So when he does that with a song, and he brings you a song and plays it on an acoustic, then is it up to you then to create a lead, or does he already have lead parts written out?
Well, he doesn't have really any. I mean, he doesn't have anything prepared for anyone else. Now, if there's like a melody line or something, then that's implied. It's kind of like, well, you know, I'll probably do that on the chorus or whatever it is. Dave Cobb, the producer, jumps in pretty fast with ideas. You know, so it's kind of like, you know, really in my position, I'm just trying to listen to both of them and then also try to put my own spin on what's coming at me, you know. So that's kind of how it goes.
Yeah, and Dave's had just a fairly decent track record in recent years.
Yeah, he's doing pretty good. Yeah,
he's doing all right. Yeah, it seems like anything Dave Cobb touches, it does remarkably well.
yeah.
So you know, we're still locked down. You've got two great records that I'm sure you are just dying to get out there and go play clubs, go play venues. As you know, you and I were supposed to do this in person in St. Louis, but because you and Jason, the 400 unit, were going to be there, but we couldn't. So any ideas when this? I mean, I think there's still a lot of questions out there, but have you guys have a timeline in the back of your head where you're going to get out maybe in the fall, or what's going on with that?
You know, we're taking it. It's like I say week to week.
Yeah.
Seems like information trickles in at the end of every week. I really don't know, Aaron. A lot of things are up in the air. I mean, there are artists that have canceled everything that they have in the fall, and there's people that are still hanging on to dates. There's offers coming in, there's offers going away. I mean, it's uncertain right now. I mean, I believe that we may play some things before the year's over. I don't know what form they're going to be in, but hopefully we just keep you know, gaining information about what the effects are from this thing, from large gatherings and things like that, because I think that will inform really the entire concert industry and sports industry and anything that requires large gatherings of people.
Yeah. And in the meantime, writing new music, still producing, working with Morgan. Is that what's going on?
Yeah. Yes, I'm about to enter mixing on Morgan's record, and I'm writing some new songs. I might even be able to put 2 songs out before the year's over. And yeah, and I'm looking at a few other things to produce. And you know, I did get to fire one show off for my record on March 7th at the Mercy Lounge, and you can actually purchase that live show on Bandcamp. But right now I call it was the last great rock show.
And is there a link to that Bandcamp on your website, sadlervaden.com?
Yeah, and also the link is, I believe, sadlervaden.bandcamp.com for Bandcamp.
Okay. Well, Sadler, thank you so much for being on the Load Out today.
Thanks, Aaron.
Congratulations on, the remarkable success you've had this year, and only hope you guys get back on the road soon, and
I do too.
And everything, all this wave of good luck for you continues, and it's probably more than good luck. It's a lot of hard work you put into this. So thanks so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me, Aaron. Take care, man.
Take care.
Hey folks, if you made it this far, and judging by our numbers you haven't, thanks for listening to the Load Out Music Podcast. You can always find us at loadoutmusic.com and wherever you like to get your podcasts like iTunes or SoundCloud. And of course, as always, thanks to Gaslight Studios for hosting us. Have a good one.